Good morning, everyone. Are you ready to get started? Well, thank you for taking time to come and hear a little bit more about continuous improvement. I had quite a challenge trying to take a 4-hour masterclass and cram it into 7 minutes before, and it's even also challenging to make it an hour and a half. What I hope to do today is to inspire you, to share a model that I have personally implemented as a teacher, as a school director, and now as CEO of a board. And so what I'm sharing with you, I can speak from my own firsthand experience. It works. It is a process, though. You heard me this morning speak about the concept of a bridge. And I like to revisit that as we start again the story of continuous improvement. What I like to share is continuous improvement and the process and the journey is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It takes endurance, it takes focus, and it takes time. And so as you embark on your own improvement journey, know that there is a process and there is time, and over time, when we implement the model, we see results. And we'll talk about that this morning. So I want to come back to this concept of change again, especially as it relates to our students. If we resist change, we'll fail. If we accept change, we'll survive, we'll make it. But if we can create change, we'll succeed. And so continuous improvement is really all about helping our students create change, because that's going to be the only constant that our students know is that constant change. And so today, what we'll do is use a process. If we're going to have to address change, and we know that we do because we have to think and do differently, we're going to refer to the experts in change. And so I'm going to introduce or maybe review with you the 8 steps of John Kotter's change model. Has anybody read the book, My Iceberg is Melting? Some of you? It's a fictional story that Kotter uses to illustrate how a group of penguins who lived on an iceberg and noticed it was beginning to melt had to go through the 8 steps of change in order to transform their way of life. And those 8 steps are these. I'm going to take you through each step, show you examples, and we're going to talk about, as leaders, how do we help prepare our teachers and our students and our community to go through the process of change. And it all begins first with creating a sense of urgency. There's a saying that the only person who really likes change is a baby with a dirty diaper, because it's uncomfortable. And part of the role of the school leader is to bring about some discomfort in the system. If everybody's comfortable and complacent, they won't be motivated to think or do differently. The typical response is, isn't what we're doing good enough? And so in order to stimulate the change process, the school leader begins with the process of creating a sense of urgency. And I'm going to demonstrate 2 ways in which school leaders can create that urgency. The first one is this: facts and data. Because you can't have an emotional reaction to something that's factual. It can't be debated, and it can't be argued. And so I like to begin with this concept of, when we review our data at our school, what do we see? What do student achievement results look like? What is satisfaction like? Are parents enrolling their children in our schools, or are they enrolling them in schools that we're competing with? What's our financial situation? So I want to share with you from my own situation. I'm in my 2nd year as a CEO of a board, and when I walked in, I asked to see the results of student achievement in the areas of reading and math. And I said I would like to see 5 years of trend data. And what I saw were flat or declining achievement results. how would you answer the question? If you saw this data, would you say, is this an organization that is continuously improving? The answer is obviously no. And so one of the first things that I did when I came into my own situation as CEO was started to share the reality of our school through data. We looked at revenues. This is our financials. And there's a lot of pictures up here, but I want you to see one in particular. This is the revenue that we have to fund our schools. And this is what our projection is on the amount of funding we will have for our schools if we don't think or do differently. In other words, we're spending more money than we were taking in, and we were looking at a situation where years from now we wouldn't even be able to exist. So I want you to think as a school leader, two things. One, 5 years of trend data that's flat or declining, and we're spending money that's not getting results. And so very quickly, we begin to create a sense of urgency in our situation that we're going to have to think or do differently, or we won't exist as a school. Now there's some urgency. Now we're getting people to think, what are we going to do differently? The next thing I did was said, how satisfied are parents and our students and our teachers? And so we looked at some data. Real quickly, the principal at this school is an effective manager who makes the school run smoothly. The percent who agreed with that statement were 28%. So almost 75% of the people said, no, we don't see the leadership. Communication, have we communicated our point B? A compelling vision for our school? Only about half the people said, yeah. And then the third one, our instructional materials are well coordinated, and only 20% agreed with that statement. So I showed you 3 data points, all of which tell the same message, and that message is this. We're not improving. We're spending money at a rate by which in the next few years we won't be able to operate the school, and there's very low satisfaction. Now, this is the kind of school that I like to come into because it can't get a whole lot worse, right? And so we have begun the process of following these 8 steps of change, and what I hope to do to share with you as school leaders my own situation so you can see practical ways in which, as a school leader, you can bring your school through the change process. Now, that's one way to do it. Here's urgency strategy number 2. Do we have a compelling vision for our school? In other words, how do we want our students to leave our school? What do we promise them? What do we promise our parents? And are we accomplishing it? And so the second one doesn't deal with qualifications like facts and data and achievement results. It deals with the heart. It deals with what are we here to do together for these students, and are we accomplishing it? And so this is the second strategy in order to try and create a sense of urgency in the system. You've all seen this quote before, if we don't change the direction we're heading, we're probably going to end up there. And that's why I use the results, the financials, the satisfaction data that says if we don't do anything different, we're going to continue down that path, and that isn't acceptable. So I want you to take just a moment. We're going to do what I call a pair and share, and you're only going to get about a minute or two. I want you to introduce yourself to someone next to you, and I want you to discuss what sense of urgency is there at this moment in your school. Okay? Take a moment, make an introduction, talk about what level of urgency exists at this moment. So the concept is this. If we don't begin with change and urgency, we haven't answered the why question. So the why question is where it all begins. Why would we want to think or do differently in our school? And as a school director, a school leader, you need to have some strategies that you can use to go back into your situation and begin to create the sense of urgency. And so Cotter's step 1 is very true. Until you create a sense of urgency, you will not create a reason or rationale for change. So I want to lead out with this concept. As we look at continuous improvement in your school, how will we shape education based on a cohesive vision and mission? That's the point B. Because once we get people urgent, ready for change, we have to then begin pointing to what's the other side of the bridge look like? What does point B look like? How will we organize ourselves into productive learning teams? How will we share leadership? How will we align what's most important throughout the school so that everybody is participating in that? We're going to end the session today with the concept of plan, do, study, act. The Deming circle, or in Holland what you call the verbater circle. Not bad, was it? The concept is this, and you heard one of the speakers this morning say it. We can't experiment in our schools because we're impacting our students. And so the plan, do, study, act cycle ensures that we don't continue practices that aren't proven to be effective. And so we'll speak about that shortly this afternoon. Okay, so we have urgency in your school. Now people are saying, now what? This isn't good. We are not in a good situation at this moment. Now we create the team who's going to help facilitate the process of a shared vision. And so the next step is this concept of shared leadership. I define it in a couple different ways. Responsibility for problem identification, but more importantly, solutions to the problems we face. Notice the words that are underlined. A representative group. Acting collaboratively. Solving agreed upon issues. That's what shared leadership is. It's an action group. We don't memorialize the problems. We identify them and we move into solutions. And that's what a shared leadership team is all about. And the role of the leader is this: to be the custodian of the vision, to never let it get out of sight within your school. And so to do that, I introduced this morning this concept. And this model can work in a couple different ways. It can be section leaders all working with a team leader. It can be at a higher level where you have multiple schools that are collaborating and working together. The key is that we have representation. And I'm going to show you, once we have that representative group, these are the things that we need to do together. What we're doing when we answer these questions is identifying point B for our school. And so in your situation, what do we really stand for? How do we look at our students and their parents? What do we offer students and parents at our school? What's unique about our school that makes us separate from the others? What are we accountable to? And how do we want students to leave our school? If you can answer these questions, you've just defined the other side of the bridge, point B. So once we have urgency and we bring together the team, that shared leadership team takes responsibility not for answering the questions themselves, but for facilitating a process so that all voices are heard in the response to these questions. And I'll show you some practical strategies. The concept is working together gets the goods. And so when we approach the concept of shared leadership, I want you to think about a group of educators coming together for the purpose of answering those 6 questions that becomes our school identity. It becomes our point B, or the other side of the bridge. Once we've done that, we take that vision and mission, we take our values and our goals and our strategies, and we begin to put it into something that we can communicate out. That's what we call point B. When these pieces come together, with voices and input from parents and teachers and students, we now have described the other side of the bridge. So let's back up. We started with urgency, because unless we have urgency, we haven't answered the question why. Once we know we can't stay in our current state or our current situation, we need a group of people who are going to share leadership and responsibility for facilitating a process of creating a vision for the school. And so we're going to go into some strategies that help us create vision and mission and give everybody a voice. But first, if I asked you, in your school, can you tell me the mission of your school? What's the vision for the school? If I walked around your school and knocked on doors of teachers and said, can you tell me what the mission of the school is? Would there be an accurate response? Sometimes educators are very good at creating mission statements and vision statements and putting them on the walls and putting them on taglines in their email and putting them in places, but they haven't really communicated what that vision looks like. And so mission is this. It answers this question, because often people will say, what's the difference between mission and vision? Mission is what we're here to do together now. Vision looks to the future and says, what does it look like when we are doing what we are here to do and doing it well? Mission is our purpose today. Vision is when we really do our purpose today well over time, what's it look like? It answers the question, how do we want our students to leave our schools? And so we're going to use this concept. If a man knows not what harbor he seeks, then any wind is the right wind. What does that mean to you? It means if the wind's blowing this way and we catch it in our sails, we'll go that way, regardless of that's where our harbor or the point that we're trying to get to is, or our point B. And so as school leaders, school directors, you have to keep the compass on the true north. You are the one with your shared leadership team who makes sure that everything we do, every decision we make, every euro we spend is moving us toward point B. So I ask you this question. In your school, in your situation, is there clear direction? Have you made a compelling point B, and are you communicating it? And do people know what it is so that they can think and do differently in order to achieve it? And so, I want to talk about how do we get people aligning their work, aligning it to the vision. How do we get every teacher knowing what their role and responsibility is in contributing to point B? How do we get sections and departments aligning their work all toward that vision? And so this concept of alignment is as simple as this. Everybody grabbing hold of the rope, pulling in the same direction at the same time. That's how you move a system forward. But it takes everybody. And it takes everybody understanding what their part is to do so. So I want to introduce the concept of alignment, and I'm going to speak at 4 levels. One is the stichting, the board level. The next level of an organization is the school. The next level down are individual classroom teachers. And the last and most important level are the students themselves. And so by using this concept, we're going to talk about how aligning from the board level to the school level, from the school level and into the sections or the teams, and from that level all the way into the classroom. And what I shared with you this morning was this slide, which really focused on the students. But the concept of continuous improvement is getting everybody in the organization, from the board to the school to the teacher to the student, all moving in the same direction. I want to play for you a 40-second video clip, and it's from a school that I was at previously in which we had begun implementing this model. And we interviewed a teacher. And the person doing the interviewing said, "What made the difference in the results you're getting?" I want you to listen for what the teacher said was the reason for the results that they were getting. And I want you to see if you can identify on this map specifically what it was. So that was the CEO of the school at the time. I had started this process, and 5 years later, they were starting to see results. What did you hear the teacher say? I know it was difficult. She said, "We're focusing on the areas for improvement. We know how the students are doing. The students are tracking their progress in a portfolio. And as a team, we're reviewing results." And then you heard the CEO come on at the end, and he said, "When you get everybody believing in a process, that's when you see results." And that's really the concept of alignment through here, is how do we get every part of the organization aligned and working toward what we've described as point B. And so the model is designed to do this. Most systems and organizations, not just schools, they're moving in a direction. They have goals and measures identified, but people within the organization haven't necessarily changed what they're doing in order to align with the goals and measures. And so the continuous improvement alignment approach takes us from random acts of improvement to what we call aligned acts of improvement, where imagine this arrow being your school. And at your school, you've got vision, mission, values, goals, things you're measuring. And imagine these smaller arrows to be classroom teachers. And the work that they're doing day in and day out is aligned to what we said was most important, or that point B. Change the model. Pretend that this arrow is a classroom, a section, mathematics section, teacher, and these arrows are now students. And the work that's being done by the students is aligned to the goals and measures of the classroom. And the goals and the measures of the classroom are aligned to the school. And the goals and measures of the school are aligned to the board. And so it's through this model, over time, that organizations transform themselves into the kind of organization that they envisioned. Point B, 3 to 5 years from now, what do we want to accomplish in our schools? And so alignment is about every person rowing in the same direction at the same time, because that's how we make progress. If each one of these rowers decided when they wanted to row, what would happen to the boat? Spin in circles. It might go forwards, it might go backwards. By luck, it might move in the direction that it was intending. And so alignment is about ensuring we have that kind of situation in our schools, from sections into classrooms and down to students. So I use this phrase with you. In the absence of clear direction, people will determine for themselves what's most important. So if we don't answer the question, what's most important? If I asked you what's most important, and let's say we have 70 people in here, I would get 70 different responses on what's most important. Some of them might be similar, but only by chance. And so what we don't want as school leaders, we don't want the absence of clear direction. And that clear direction is created by that shared leadership team who facilitates the process of identifying vision, mission, values, goals, or what we call point B. So, let's talk about, practically speaking, on our journey from point A to point B, how do we take what might be our current situation, a lot of bends and turns in the road, to something that looks a little bit more streamlined? That's where the concept of alignment is beneficial to us. So I want to share with you a strategy that we call the plan on a page. Most strategic documents are big, thick binders that might sit on a bookshelf somewhere, but they don't cause people to be thinking and doing differently. It's too complex. It's too much. And certainly our students aren't going to be very familiar with what's in our strategic plan. And so we're going to talk about how can you, on one page, take your mission, your vision, your values and beliefs, and your goals, and have it on a page that everybody can see, that can be clearly communicated, that everybody has a copy of point B in their workspace. So this concept is done with a couple different processes, and I want to show you this briefly. Because if I take my leadership team and I close them in a room together and I say, well, why don't you write the mission, the vision, the values, the goals? Whose plan is that then? Shared leadership teams. Doesn't represent all voices. So I'm going to show you a process that you can use, and within a couple of short meetings, you can get the voice of every stakeholder in your organization. Every student, every teacher, and every parent who's willing to participate. You can get their voice captured. I'm going to introduce 3 tools. I call them the power tools: brainstorming, affinity diagram, and nominal group technique. So what are those? Imagine if you brainstormed and you just simply posed a question. And the question was, what do we want our students to leave our school? How do we want them to leave? And what is our vision of an excellent section or team? You can keep changing the question in order to help stimulate the responses you're looking for. So if I'm going to write a mission or a vision for my school, I'm going to have my leadership team hold a meeting and invite all teachers, invite parents, give students a voice, give them sticky notes, those little yellow sticky notes. Pose the question and organize them into groups of 7 or 8. They're talking, they're working, and then as they come up with their ideas, they're representing them on the sticky note and they're putting them on a poster. And in about 15 to 20 minutes, I can assure that everyone who was interested and showed up had a voice that's getting considered in the process. You can also do this electronically. You can use SurveyMonkey. You can use other means by which if someone can't physically come to a meeting, they can interact online. There's lots of ways to do this, but the concept is this. If you end up with a plan on the page that you or a small group of people wrote, it won't be worth the words on the paper, because people will say, I had no input into that. When we're done, we want this process to bring us to the point where people say, yes, that's what I envision for this school. That's point B. That's important to me. And so once we do the brainstorming, this is an example. I just did this in my system last year, my first year as CEO. And we brought in people, and we posed the questions, and we gave them opportunities to interact, to talk. And then they went and walked around and saw all the other ideas, because it validates that, hey, they came up with the same kinds of ideas that our group did. And so through this process, we start to take those ideas, we go back to the question, and we say, well, look at all these ideas that were similar. We start to cluster them and group them. Because I want to take independent thoughts and I want to create group thought. And so I'm not eliminating ideas, I'm just sorting. And I'm sorting them according to themes, common themes, that each of the ideas are similarly related. And what this tells me is, what are some of the most important things that people responded to in this question? So I'm going to pay a lot of attention to theme 4 and theme 3, which seem to have a lot of similar thoughts. So who's doing this work? The shared leadership team, the quality management team. They're not coming up with the content. They're facilitating a process by which voices are now starting to be heard. I can do this with parents. I can do this with students. I can do it with all teachers. I can do it with the community. And what's very interesting is, if you did them separate groups, by the time you pull it all together, you're going to see a lot of the same kinds of things. So this is step 2. Once you give people a voice and you capture their thought, now we need to organize it into something that will help us construct that plan on the page. And so these are ideas that are coming out from stakeholders, from parents, from teachers, not just from the shared leadership team. All the leadership team is doing is facilitating the process. So these little dots now become, once we have all these ideas out there, how do we give people a voice as to, out of all the thoughts and ideas, how would you rank order them? What was most important? Because we can't include on a plan on a page a lot of different ideas. We want the most important, critical few. There's a term we use in America, and it's focus on the critical few, not the trivial many. What's the critical few? And this process gives everyone, again, a voice. And I put this information back out, and I tell people, tell me what's most important. And the shared leadership team is paying careful attention. And then they're going to go back, they're going to take that information, and they're going to begin the process of starting to draft a vision statement, a mission statement. They're starting to create an actual document. But all they did was facilitate. Where did all the ideas come from? Everybody else. Remember, a strategic plan isn't worth the paper it's written on unless it's the true beliefs of the organization. And you can't do that in isolation. You can't even pick a handful of people to work on it. Everyone gets a voice. And through this process, we begin to take those ideas. We begin to craft them into statements and drafts of language that we're going to come back to. And as a group, we're providing opportunities to capture what we heard from people. And so notice, I had multiple groups, mission ideas, vision ideas, and then the leadership team says, hey, there's certain things in each of these that are saying the same thing. That tells me people have communicated what's most important, and I have a lot of consensus. There's going to be a lot of support for the products and the sentences and the statements that come out of that. I do something even more important. I take it to the students. And it's the students who provide their feedback and their input. And we make sure that their voice as the primary customer is heard. And so the process of creating vision, mission, values, and goals is it has to be inclusive. And all the shared leadership team does is facilitate, condenses, refines, and drafts. But it's everyone's voice that went into the process. I'm going to stop for a moment because I've done a lot of talking and I see some droopy eyes out there. Take a few minutes and talk about the process and what you see as the value in using a process in tools similar that gets you the content that's going to fit well into our plan on a page. Take a few minutes and just talk about the process. Is it similar to what you've used? Is it different? Was there new learning? Is this consistent with what you've been doing? Take a few minutes and talk about it. So I want you to reflect on where we've been in the change process. Urgency, shared leadership team, facilitating a process for creating vision, and now communicating the vision. So we're going to talk about a few strategies on how do we take this concept of a plan on a page and have it be the tool that we use to communicate point B. And it's through this process that we will have the ability to begin to get people to think and do differently and align their work to what it is we said is most important. So the concept is taking those questions and being able to find answers through the process of facilitation leads us to the plan on a page. So I want to talk about this concept now of alignment. How do we take the plan for sections and begin to give each section the ability to align the mission of this section to the school? Section or team goals align to the goals of the school. And we begin to allow some customization to this process. We want it to be relevant. And so I want you to think in terms of math, science, social studies, music, fine arts, any other departments or sections within the school that may have something unique about it that can be customized to the plan on the page for the school. And so each section might have a little bit of a different mission, some different goals that they're measuring, but what's consistent across all of these is the vision, values, and beliefs are the same throughout. So if you looked at just this section, the vision and beliefs, they are the exact same across any section or department, because that's what I want to have alignment to. So the concept is, in your school, how do you create the ability for people to customize what it is their most attention is being focused on? How do we take the plan on the page for the teams? In America, we have middle school, we have primary, middle schools, and high schools. And as the CEO of the board in my system, I might have a primary school, a middle school, and a high school, but we're all part of one sticking. And so I have to have enough flexibility where my middle school and my high school may have slightly different missions, because the mission is, what am I here to do today? The vision is the same for everybody, because that's what we want to aspire to over time. The goals and the values and beliefs are the same, because we're going to operate together in a certain way. But our goals might be different. The goals for middle school might be different than goals for the high school. So I'm allowing this customization to occur, but it's all traced back to the school plan on the page. The important thing is that people feel like the mission for their section or their team is relevant, makes sense, and it guides their work. So we're going to take a look at how do we get students involved in this process. And I've got a video clip that I want to show you. We went to our high school and we gave them the plan on the page in its final form, and we said, we want student voice in this process. We want you to bring this to life in the form of a video. And so they went around the school, they took photos, they took video clips, and then they edited a video to a song. And they said, this is how students view this plan on the page for the school. And so what I'm about to show you was completely created by students. The only direction we gave them was create something that tells high school students what this plan on a page is all about. We won't watch the entire thing, but I want you to see what this looks like when we involve our high school students. You're going to see words come across in the video, and the words are lined up to our vision and our mission. So you're going to see things like self-motivated learners, critical thinkers, effective communicators. You're going to see those come to life through the voice of the student. Have a look. You get the sense of the ability to put the words on the paper and get it into the hands of students where it has some meaning to them. They really enjoyed the project because they had to really understand the plan on the page. They had to understand the vision and the mission in order to set forth to capture what that looks like when we're doing it well. And so that's one way that we involve our students in this concept of the plan on the page. So we're making our way through Cotter's change process. And I want to move next into, once we have the plan and we're communicating it, now how do we get people empowered? How do we empower everyone in the process, especially the students, in order to start thinking and doing differently, aligned to our vision, mission, values, goals, or our point B? So this is the concept that we've been talking about with alignment, from the board level to the school, to the section or the team, into the mentor group, and all the way down to the students. What we want is every level of the school aligned and contributing to point B. And so to do that, one of the things that we want to incorporate is this concept of teamwork, having people organized in a way in which each person is contributing with their different skills and talents in order to work toward those common goals. And so in this model, I want you to think about how do we together, each of us has a role. I like the Three Stooges. Someone's got to hold the ball, someone's got to have the ball on their head, and one person's going to kick it. Each of us has a particular role to play and a contribution to a task that we're trying to accomplish. So we're going to move into this concept now of how do we organize our teachers into teams that begin to think and do differently, accomplishing goals toward that plan on the page. And we'll use the PLG model. Many of you are already familiar with it and already using it to some degree, but we want to organize teachers, every teacher on a team. Everybody's connected to someone else in the organization. It could be by section, it could be by team, it could be in some other way in which teachers have something similar in common, but everybody, no one escapes participating on a PLC. And we continue to emphasize that concept of teachers as professionals. We want them focusing on the most important things within that plan on the page. We want them reviewing data. We want them looking at their processes. We want them to share best practices with each other. What's working? What isn't working? What success are we finding? What can I learn from you as a professional colleague that might help me be more effective with my students? We want teachers to be reflective, to reflect on their practice and ask the question, what could I be doing differently in order to get different results? We want them action-focused, the ability to know when we leave this meeting, how are we going to do differently in order to get different results? And so PLGs answer these three questions. The first is, what do we want students to know and be able to do? That's point B for our students. Do our students know what we want them to know and be able to do? Question 2 is, when we come together, how do we know if they've learned it? I'm going to have to look at results and data. Question 3 is, what will we do as a professional learning community of teachers when some students aren't learning what we expect them to learn? What will we do? How will we take responsibility as a team in order to do and think differently so that all students are accomplishing success? So the concept now is we've got teachers empowered, teachers on a professional learning team, working together, reviewing data, sharing best practices, sharing what's working and what isn't, seeking help from each other. We're now going to spend the rest of our time talking about how do we empower the students in the process. We've got the structure, we've created the urgency, we've got the leadership team. They facilitated a process of vision, mission, values, and goals. We got it to a page, we've communicated it out, we've empowered the adults in the system. Now, the most unique aspect of this model is, how do we empower every student? And so, we talked briefly this morning about the concept of 21st century learning. We know that these kinds of concepts need to be deeply rooted in what we do with our students. So the question is, how do we organize, how do teachers organize their classrooms and their way in which they teach that these concepts are deeply embedded in how they teach their subject area? I also mentioned this morning briefly about this concept: qualification, socialization, and subjectification. It's not all about the content in the academics. It's not all about the socialization, the social, emotional, behavioral realm. And it's not just about autonomy and responsibility. But when these pieces come together, the student finds their identity. And we find ourselves in a situation where they can be successful out in society on the job, but they've personalized their learning. And so the model helps us do this. I'm going to speak briefly about these, and I'm going to show you just a few examples of what it might look like. I talked this morning about the concept of when you walk into a classroom and the teacher already has the teacher's rules on it. What message did I send to my students? I sent the message, this is my classroom. These are my rules, and if you don't like it, tough. And by the way, if you break one of those rules, this will happen to you. Not a very student-focused environment, is it? We've clearly said to the student, this is my room, and you should be lucky to be in my room. So we change the paradigm, and we start talking with students about what commitments will we make to each other as a mentor group, as a class. And we go through a process using the 3 power tools. But it's the students creating the commitments, the rules, the norms that they want to follow. So the students are brainstorming, putting together like ideas, and then rating them as a class what's most important. This concept is group mission. We show the students the plan on the page for the section or the team, and we say, in this mentor group, what's our mission? How do we contribute to it now? We know what the vision is. We know what the values and beliefs are, but what are we going to do as a mentor group? And then we start talking about goals. We say, well, if that's our mission, what goals would we have for ourselves? And so students begin to set goals as a group. We start to track goals in a portfolio or in a learning center. And we start to get a visual of what's most important and the progress we're making. And then we talk about meeting as a class, student-led conferences, class meetings, and ultimately we engage students in the plan, do, study, act cycle so that when we find we're not making improved results, we use the PDSA cycle with the students in order to think and do differently to get different results. So this is the model. These 8 components, when they come together, help us meet what we've talked about with BISTA, but more importantly, we start to align what we're doing as a learning community of students. And so in this model, we want to involve the students in the process. This is an activity that was done with a school, a high school in the Netherlands. And my colleague, Hank Molders, was the one who helped with the idea of asking the students, what does a good lesson look like? And he worked with the teachers in the building and the school director, and he said, let's ask the students what they think is their expectation of a good lesson. And you can see that they talked about what's most important, what is their expectation of the teacher, what's the expectation for students, and you'll see some interesting things in here. They thought the teacher should have a passion and be positive, have humor incorporated, gives positive feedback. You'll see things like stimulates our own discovery of learning, differentiates based on different learning styles. This was interesting, is on time. Gives a goal and is well prepared for the lesson. So we're getting the voice of our students, and we're having our teachers recognize and identify what's most important to the student. And so these are just examples of how we begin to incorporate the voice of the student through that student learning community that now makes them feel empowered. And you'd be surprised at how this impacts teachers. When they said, I didn't realize that was important to you as a student. But if we don't ever ask the question, we won't ever get the response. So I've got a short example. This is from America. It's a high school class. It's actually a speech debate section. And the teacher is facilitating the concept of creating norms for the class. So we'll watch just, it's less than a minute, but I want you to hear the teacher facilitate with the students and hear the voice of what's important to them. So through this process, the teacher had the ability to get the students to make collective commitments to each other. Vastly different than the students walking into her room and her rules are on the board already and the consequences for not following them. What we have found is that behavior issues are reduced by more than half when the students have ownership and a voice in what they're agreeing to. They are making collective commitments to each other, creating a classroom learning community, the same way our teachers are coming together and making commitments to each other regarding the way in which they want to operate. So the concept is simple. The tools and the process is simple. Giving students a voice individually, collecting those ideas as a group, and then identifying what's most important. But we're giving students the opportunity to be leaders. And that's our goal, is to develop all students into leaders through the process. So I want you to think about the concept of alignment again, where we get the strategic plan on a page, we've got the point B described, and in that plan we've got goals, we've got things we're measuring. And if we can align those from the board level to the school, into the section, the team, the mentor group, the classes, and all the way down to the students, where they're setting their own SMART goal and tracking their own progress in a portfolio with the ability to then be accountable and responsible for their own learning. And it's through this process of alignment that we begin to see the kind of results that we haven't been able to achieve before, because we now have every person in the organization setting goals, tracking progress, and monitoring it on a regular basis. And it's through this process that we engage every learner in what's most important at the school. So when you think about this concept of measurement, I want you to think about the dashboard of a car. And in the dashboard, from time to time, warning lights come on. And if we can get a visual of our progress, we'll know if we see something that's indicating we're not succeeding at the level at which we hoped. And so just like a dashboard in a car is important to you when you're trying to travel from point A to point B. If I were living in Holland, in Amsterdam, and I wanted to go to Rotterdam, I'd probably need some instruments to help me get there. You may not, because you know the country, but I might. So I want to make sure, do I have enough gas? I want to follow my speed along the way, because I know you have those cameras that like to capture your license plate and send you a nice letter in the mail. I want to see engine temperature. I need instrumentation. I might want my GPS there as well. That tells me if my heading is correct, because I don't want to spend a lot of time driving around from point A to point B. I want to get there efficiently. And so just like a dashboard helps a driver get from point A to point B, dashboards in the classroom and in the school help us do the same. If you were going on an airplane home, let's say I get on my United flight and the captain comes on and he says, welcome aboard to flight 908 with service to Chicago. You'll be happy to know I am taking a blanket and throwing it over all of the instruments on the airplane. We're just going to see if we can get home by feel. Enjoy the flight. Concept is the same in education. If we don't have good instrumentation and measures, we run the risk of not making it to point B. And so, this is an example of what you might see in a school. When I walk in, I'm greeted with an information board, what I call a data center. And in the data center, you might see some familiar things, like the Stichting plan on a page, the school plan on a page, our school mission, behavior expectations, commitments that we've made to each other, and then a variety of goals and measures in which we are tracking progress and communicating it. So when I walk into this school every day, I always throw a look at the dashboard. How's the school doing? What kind of progress? What goals did they set? So this is an example of getting a dashboard for your school. Next, you can take it in. Here's an example of what it could look like in a mentor group data center. So there I see the district, the school, and then the mentor plan on a page. All of them have the same vision and values, but the mission might be tweaked at each level, and the goals might be aligned, but not the exact same. And so I also see things like mentor group norms or ground rules that we created, goals that we're monitoring and measuring. And as the model continues, you can see how this concept of measuring what's most important, aligned to the plan on the page, gives us a dashboard. Think about this, school leaders. If you had every teacher using a dashboard within their classroom, think about what your visits to the classroom could look like. You would know in an instant what people are focusing on, what we're holding ourselves accountable to, and we can answer the question, are we continuously improving? And so in my schools, if you picked a classroom, you'd walk in, you would see these kinds of metrics. And if we have the right stuff we're measuring, that's when continuous improvement and results happen over time. We use feedback tools. When we see our data in our mentor group data center that doesn't have good results, we involve the students in the process. We ask them what's going well. They're reflecting, what would we do differently? We're involving students in how we're going to measure. I've got a 30-second example from America where a student is talking about a rubric, a measuring instrument they're using to assess progress. So it's a simple example, but it's where the student and the teacher together are looking at expectations. The student is self-reflecting, and then the teacher reflects. And they talk about where do they evaluate the same, and where is it different, and why. And so we're constantly talking with students about what's important, how we're going to measure it, and then we're going to reflect on our progress along the way. I'll share a couple more components and then bring some closure to our time together. I want to talk about this concept of student-led conference. And we're going to see an example here in just a minute. But this is where we bring to life those real 21st century skills. We bring to life this concept of student having ownership of their learning. What you're going to see is a short clip. This is a student. Her parents are on either side, and she's going to take a quick tour through the student portfolio. It has her goals, charts and graphs and work samples that's measuring what she said was important, her own reflection of what's working and what isn't, and you're going to see how the student is in the lead and how the student has ownership for her learning. So that's a short example of student-led conference and how we empower the student and have them take the lead for their own learning. As we conclude, I want to show the last couple steps of Kotter's change model, and I want you to reflect on where we've been in the process, from urgency to quality management team, facilitating the vision, plan on the page, and communicating, empowering teachers, and empowering students in the process. Anchoring the change. To anchor change and not find ourselves in a position where we're flat or plateauing, we use this process called Plan, Do, Study, Act. And I want you to notice something interesting. When we use this process, almost half of our time is spent in the planning stage, so that when we actually do something, we're going to study the results, and if it worked, we're going to standardize it. If it didn't work, we're going to go back and we're going to analyze causes. And we're going to keep doing this process until we find whatever we're doing differently is working. And in working in this way, we never have wasted efforts. We're not introducing something and then doing it for the rest of our life, regardless of if it's working or not. We only introduce things that we're going to measure, monitor, and answer the question, is it working? And so through this process, we involve students. And we want them to have an ability to know how to make improvements in their own learning using a process similar. I like to show you a few photos where they really didn't spend time planning, they just started doing. You've heard the term painting yourself into a corner? They're painting a pool and they've backed up into each other and said, I guess we should have planned this better. I like this one. If there's not enough room, just cut a hole in the door, and we didn't plan very well. And then this one could have been a photo from my house using my home improvement skills, installing the light switches and not thinking about the space. But the concept is we will find ourselves in a much better place when we invest in the planning side. In many organizations, and especially schools, we see a problem and we throw solutions at it. And we keep throwing solutions at it. And let's say there is a problem and there's 5 different things that we were going to throw at it. And really only one of the things was making a difference. That's how we take work off of teachers' plate. We only incorporate the things that are working, and when they don't work, they're gone. We quit doing them. So I want you to think about in your system what needs to go on your stop doing list. So PDSAs you'll find in the classroom, you'll find them in professional learning communities, you'll find the quality management team using a process that answers the question, is this working? And if so, how do we make it part of our standard process? It's also important, Cotter's final stage is that celebrate success. Along the way and in the journey, find opportunities to celebrate success and appreciate the progress that's being made. And so I shared this with you this morning, and I share it again. I hope that throughout this masterclass, you at least have a sense that we're using research-based best practices. We're using the change model. We're involving everybody in the process. We're giving everybody a voice. We're sharing leadership. Most importantly, we're doing that with our students. This presentation is online. If you go to my website, you can find it. If you need assistance with it, you can send me an email. But if you wanted a copy of this to be able to bring back to your organization, there's a copy available. Also, schools that are interested in further support, I come back to Holland twice a year, but the organization that I work with, Expertus, Mr. Molders is from Expertus, they do train the trainers throughout Holland. And we have several organizations right now that are now getting training in Dutch from our Dutch trainers from Expertus. And they're creating learning organizations. So we're really starting to see some good momentum with organizations and schools that are embracing the model. So with that, I wish you success. Thank you.